Berlin, April 29th, 1945. 1 o'clock in the morning, the sound arrives before anything else. Artillery. Distant at first, a low rhythmic concussion, each impact following the last with the regularity of a pulse. Then beneath it, the mechanical drone of a generator, constant, exhausted, the sound of a building that has forgotten the sun. Then, cutting through both, the sharp, precise clatter of typewriter keys. A young woman sits at a desk in a concrete room 50 feet below ground. She has been woken minutes ago. She is 24 years old. The man standing behind her, reading from notes, is Adolf Hitler. Soviet troops are fewer than 1,000 yards away. The city above is burning. The war is 8 days from ending, and he has something he wants to say to history. He clears his throat. He begins. Outside those walls, in the tunnels and the rubble and the ruins of what was once the German capital, the ideology he built over 30 years is collapsing in real time. And inside, in the artificial light, with the dust falling from the ceiling at each shell impact, he dictates the following: that the war was desired and instigated exclusively by, and here he uses the phrase he has used 10,000 times before, international Jewry and its helpers. The words are real. They are in the archive. Anyone can read them. The question of whether he believed them. That is the one that history cannot fully answer. What was closing in on the man who spoke those words had been gathering for months. By April 1945, the Third Reich had ceased to exist in any strategic sense. What remained was a government without a country and an army without the means to fight one. The Soviet forces amassed for the final assault on Berlin numbered more than 1.5 million soldiers. Some accounts place the total at 2.5 million. Against them, the remnants of shattered formations, the Berlin police force, units of the Volkssturm militia, and a battalion of the Hitler Youth sent into the streets of the capital with an average age of 14. The Soviet commander had a deadline. Stalin wanted the Reichstag, the symbolic heart of German parliamentary power, a building that hadn't been used since 1933, captured by May 1st, International Workers' Day. The symbolism mattered to him more than the strategic value. It mattered enough that tens of thousands of men would die for it. The people of Berlin understood what was coming. They had a name for it. They called these days Die Götterdämmerung, the German translation of Ragnarok, the Norse end of the world. Hitler's 56th birthday, April the 20th, was met with the first of a series of artillery and rocket attacks that would continue practically uninterrupted for 12 days. Those who lived through them would remember a sky the color of burning metal and the sensation that the ground itself had become unreliable. The Soviet advance moves like a clock. April 23rd, the outer suburbs penetrated. April 27th, the Landwehr Canal crossed less than 2 kilometers from the Führer bunker. April 28th, forward elements of the 3rd Shock Army within 660 yards of the Reichstag, in sight of the Victory Column in the Tiergarten. April 29th, crossing the Moltke Bridge, fanning out into the surrounding streets. By the morning of April 30th, Soviet forces had reached Potsdamer Platz. The distance to the bunker, 500 meters, less than 1/3 of a mile. Each location is a tick. The Führer bunker sits on 2 levels, 50 feet below the garden of the Reich Chancellery. Bare concrete, flickering lights, the constant drone of the generator. By late April, the sound of Soviet shell fire is not a rumble but a physical concussion. Dust and chips of concrete falling from the ceiling with each impact, the air trembling with something that isn't quite sound anymore. The temperature is constant below ground, the artificial chill unchanged whether the city above is spring or fire. The effect is of a place that has been sealed off from time. Rokus Mish sits at the telephone exchange. He is 28 years old, an SS corporal, the man who handles every call that enters or leaves the bunker. From his position, he can see the corridor, the doors, the people moving between them. He sees what the briefing officers don't. He sees the Goebbels' children, 6 of them, aged 4 to 12, playing in the passage beside his switchboard. He sees Eva Braun organizing meals, arranging flowers, maintaining the rituals of a household that no longer has a house. He sees Traudl Junge at her typewriter in the conference room, fingers moving, face composed. Misch will later say that when visitors came down into the bunker, Hitler would sometimes look up from whatever he was doing and say simply, "You should have come earlier, the war is lost." He said it like a fact, like a thing he had already finished thinking about. The man who said it had aged beyond recognition. In the early 1930s, Adolf Hitler had filled arenas across Germany. The raised arm, the voice that started low and built towards something that felt, to enormous crowds, like inevitability. By April 1945, the man who steps into a room is something different entirely. The shoulders are hunched forward. The walk is a shuffle. The left arm tremors visibly, held rigidly behind his back or pressed against his belt buckle in a constant, losing effort at concealment. The uniform is stained. The face is pale and fixed, the expression flattened by the advancing Parkinson's disease his physicians had been observing for months. When physician Ernst Günther Schenk encountered Hitler for the first time in years, on April 21st, what he recorded in his memoir was not a diagnosis. It was a portrait. A living corpse, Schenk wrote, a dead soul. His spine was hunched, his shoulder blades protruded from his bent back. I was looking into the eyes of death. The man before Schenk had the body of someone 30 years older. Albert Speer had watched the same deterioration from closer range. In 1944, Speer wrote, Hitler was shriveling up like an old man. His limbs trembled. He walked stooped with dragging footsteps. His uniform, which in the past he had kept scrupulously neat, was stained by the food he had eaten with a shaking hand. The last time Hitler appears above ground is April 20th, his birthday. He comes up long enough to stand in the garden of the Reich Chancellery and pat the cheeks of teenage soldiers who have been awarded the Iron Cross. He bends toward them. He says something. The camera catches him mid-gesture, stooped, one hand reaching for the face of a boy, young enough to be his grandchild. It is the last photograph taken of him alive. The artillery has already begun. April 22nd is the hinge on which everything turns. Hitler had ordered SS General Felix Steiner to launch a counterattack from the north to relieve Berlin. A strike force, a reversal, not a contingency, not a backup. The plan. The operation that would prove the doubters wrong. When the afternoon briefing begins and the officers tell him that Steiner's assault has not happened, that Steiner does not have the men, that it cannot happen, what follows is the worst explosion of rage that anyone in the room will ever witness. The accounts come from Otto Günsche and Gerhard Bolt, officers present that afternoon. Hitler accuses his generals of treason. He declares the war lost. He announces that he will die in Berlin. And then, in a sentence that will echo through every account of the final days, he states that the German people have failed him and deserve their fate. The man who built his political career on his identification with the German nation separates himself from it entirely. They were not worthy of him. They earned what was coming. He issues orders. More orders. Armies that barely exist on paper, commanded to strike positions the enemy has already occupied for days. The officers take the orders. They say nothing. None of them say it. But 4 miles to the south, at exactly this moment, Soviet T-34 tanks have already reached Tempelhof airfield. The assault Hitler is screaming about has been made irrelevant by an army that is already there. Checked, for now, by the men defending it. But there, 4 miles away, the room empties. The bunker goes quiet. The generator drones on. From this moment, Hitler will continue issuing orders. He will continue referencing General Wenck's 12th Army, as though it can break through from the west and relieve the capital. Every briefing officer who stands across from him knows that Wenck's army is under strength, moving west toward the Elbe, incapable of attacking eastward into Berlin. Not unlikely, not difficult, impossible. The orders go out. Men die carrying them out. Nothing changes. The days between April the 22nd and April the 28th are a series of doors closing, one after another, with no pause between them. April 23rd, a telegram from Hermann Göring asking Hitler's permission to assume leadership of the Reich if Hitler cannot be reached. Hitler reads this as a coup attempt. Göring is arrested. His expulsion from the party will be written into the testament a week later. April 27th, word reaches the bunker that Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS, the man who built the apparatus of the Holocaust, has been secretly meeting with the Western Allies. He has been negotiating a separate peace. He has been doing it for weeks. For years, Hitler has raged about betrayal, treacherous generals, cowards, defeatists. In the final days, the paranoia is entirely correct. The two men closest to him for a decade are both, in different ways, working to survive by leaving him behind. This is the one time his instincts were right, a fact that sits uncomfortably alongside every other claim in the same pages. On the 28th of April, General Krebs makes his last telephone call from the bunker. Eva Braun, when offered a final chance to leave, refuses. She has been heard saying, "I would rather die here." The sentence is brief and it is final. In the corridor, the Goebbels children are still playing. April 29th, 1945. 1 o'clock in the morning. Traudl Junge hears a knock. She opens the door. Hitler stands in the corridor and he says to her, "Come along, I want to dictate something." She sits at the typewriter. He stands behind her, or moves, or pauses. The accounts are not precise about his exact posture. What they are precise about is this: he is reading from notes. He has prepared. This is not a spontaneous outpouring. Whatever comes next, he has thought about. Outside, the artillery continues its rhythm. Dust falls. The generator drones. The Soviet Third Shock Army crossed the Moltke Bridge hours ago and is fanning out through the surrounding streets. He speaks. She types. He begins with the last 3 decades of his life, his service in the First World War, his political rise, his claim, stated not as belief but as fact, as simply as one states a date, that neither he nor anyone else in Germany wanted the war in 1939. He has written it into the record. He moves on. Then, it is untrue that I or anyone else in Germany wanted the war in 1939. It was desired and instigated exclusively by those international statesmen who were either of Jewish descent or worked for Jewish interests. She types it. The keys are precise. The generator drones. He explains why he chose to stay in Berlin rather than retreat to the mountains of the south. He frames it as a sacrifice. As the forces are too small, he dictates, to make any further stand against the enemy attack at this place, I should like, by remaining in this town, to share my fate with those, the millions of others, who have also taken upon themselves to do so. He does not want to fall into the hands of an enemy who, as he puts it, requires a new spectacle for their hysterical masses. This is what he chooses to say, with the boots of Soviet soldiers scraping the pavements above the ventilation shafts of the bunker. With the city, he is claiming to die alongside already in ruins. This is the explanation he offers. He expels Göring from the party. He expels Himmler. He names Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz as president of the Reich and appoints a successor government in the same document that blames international Jewry for starting the war. The expulsions are documented. Their betrayals, in this case, are real, a fact that sits in the same pages as claims that are not. The final sentence of the political testament calls on all Germans to offer merciless resistance to what he calls the world poisoner of all peoples, international Jewry. It closes with a declaration: the construction of the National Socialist State is the work of centuries to come. He writes it down. He means it to last. At 4 o'clock in the morning, Hitler signs the document. Couriers are summoned. They will take copies out through the Soviet lines. Some will make it, some won't. One set will eventually reach the United States National Archives, where it will first go on display in April 1946, less than a year after it was written. And then, in the same hour, in the same corridor, a civil functionary is pulled from the front line to perform a marriage ceremony. Eva Braun, who refused to leave, who said she would rather die here, stands beside Adolf Hitler in a concrete room 50 feet underground. The ceremony is brief. It is conducted by a man whose name history has mostly forgotten. When it ends, someone brings out a wedding cake. The bunker corridor, the flickering lights, the cake. April 30th, the final morning. Toward noon, General Helmuth Weidling arrives for the last military briefing. He's been telling Hitler the truth for days, each time plainly, each time without softening. He tells it again. Soviet troops are storming the Reichstag. Fighting has reached the Red City Hall. Soviet forces have penetrated the Friedrichstrasse station and delivered without drama, because Weidling understands that drama will not help anyone. Russian soldiers have entered the tunnel in Vossstrasse, the street directly behind the Reich Chancellery. In all probability, Weidling says, the battle for Berlin will be over by this evening. Weidling raises the possibility of a breakout. Hitler receives this without visible emotion and then says, "Anyway, nobody is carrying out my orders." Not a decision, not a plan. A complaint about authority, delivered from the bottom of a concrete hole with the enemy in the tunnel overhead. When Weidling asks what to do when their ammunition is exhausted, which will happen no later than the following night, Hitler says he will never capitulate. The briefing ends. In the hours that follow, Hitler distributes cyanide capsules to those still around him. He tests their potency on his Alsatian dog, Blondie. This detail carries its own weight. Then he moves through the bunker, room by room, shaking hands. At least 20 people. He speaks to each one so softly that the words are almost impossible to hear. Then he gathers them in the corridor. Goebbels, Bormann, the generals, the secretaries, the cook, the pilots, and he addresses them as a group. He says he does not want to fall into Russian hands. Therefore, he says he has made his decision. At 3:30 in the afternoon, a door closes. There is a single shot. The Soviet soldiers who move through the ruins of the Reich Chancellery in the hours that follow find evidence of burning. One officer, standing in the wreckage, sends back a report. This bandit escaped in the last minute. Only burnt flesh and bones are left. His colonels reply, "Don't be sad. We were looking for victory, not for him." And they had it. When Stalin is informed that his enemy is dead, his response is brief. "It's a pity we didn't manage to take him alive." The battle continues for 2 more days. General Weidling surrenders at 6 o'clock on the morning of May 2nd and orders the capitulation of Berlin. He goes into Soviet captivity, where he will remain for years. The cost of the 16 days of fighting: 80,000 Soviet dead, 100,000 German dead, 22,000 civilians. The Goebbels children, who played in the corridor beside Mish's switchboard, are murdered by their parents on the night of May 1st. Magda Goebbels crushes cyanide capsules in their mouths while they sleep. Joseph Goebbels had appended a statement to Hitler's testament declaring that, for the first and only time in his life, he was disobeying a direct order from his Führer by refusing to leave Berlin. He and his wife die the following morning. The iconic photograph of the red banner raised over the Reichstag the image that will appear in textbooks and memorials for the next 80 years, is staged, taken during a reenactment on May 3rd, 2 days after the actual event. The building had no strategic value. Stalin's fixation on its symbolism cost thousands of lives. The image that came to stand for the moment was produced after the fact, for history's benefit. Traudl Junge makes it out of Berlin. She crosses to the river Elbe. She survives. For years, she carries what she typed in that room. Not as evidence, not as testimony, but as weight. She wrote her memoir in 1947. She did not publish it until near the end of her life. She would say later that only after the war did the full horror of what she had witnessed begin to reach her. She had been, in her own words, spellbound. She had sat in the room while those words were spoken. She had put her fingers on the keys. She died in 2002. Rochus Misch, who handled every call from the bunker switchboard, who watched the Goebbels children play in the corridor, spent 9 years in Soviet captivity after the war. He was the last surviving occupant of the Führer bunker. He died in Berlin in September 2013. The document that Hitler signed at 4 o'clock on the morning of April the 29th, 1945, in a concrete room 50 feet underground with Soviet troops crossing the Moltke Bridge above, sits today in the holdings of the National Archives. A document produced by a man who had just poisoned his dog to test whether the cyanide worked. A man whose body had, in the clinical assessment of a physician who examined him 8 days earlier, already become a dead man's body. A man who, in these final hours, chose to write not an accounting, not a reckoning, not even rage, but ideology. Intact, unmodified. Blame fully externalized. The war attributed to others, the race laws reaffirmed. And at the end, the declaration that the National Socialist state he built was the work of centuries to come. The question the document leaves, the question those typewriter keys strike into the record, is not whether he was wrong. The question is something harder. Was this a man so broken by illness and defeat that he could no longer distinguish his mythology from reality? A mind in genuine collapse, incapable of seeing what he had become and what he had done? Or was it a performance, a final, calculated act by a man who understood exactly what history was watching and chose in those last hours to play a particular role in it? The defiant ideologue, the man who never broke, the man who blamed everyone but himself, the man who left as his final word, not an apology but a claim. The words are real. They are in the archive. Anyone can read them. The question of whether he believed them is the one that history cannot fully answer.